welcome to A Kind of Meadow with Rhiannon Vaughn. I am your host, Rhiannon Vaughn, and this is a podcast about healing. Each week, we follow our guest on a journey through time and space as they undergo energy work around a specific topic of their choosing. And while the healings will have a similar flow and process and sometimes imagery that is specific to my energy work practice, each session will be highly specific and unique to the guests who have been so kind and vulnerable to share this journey with you. We are back with our first episode of 2023. I'm so excited to be here and continue on this journey with you. I've been playing a little bit with the format with each episode, and starting this episode, I'm going to let our guests share their stories. I feel like this will give some really rich context to the healing imagery. Plus, I just love hearing people's stories. Now, this week in the Meadow, we are joined by the incredibly thoughtful and amazing Andrea Forcina, MFT of Wellness Within Therapy. I've met her a few times in real life. Yes, we've done karaoke together. But when she reached out about the podcast, I knew she would offer a really fun and incredibly deep perspective as a therapist and life coach. I'll let her share her story in just a minute. But before we dive in, I want to offer a quick content warning. This week's topic revolves around Andrea's fertility journey, and it includes discussion of pregnancy loss and abuse, including physical and sexual abuse. There's some strong imagery that directly relates to those topics as well, so if this may be triggering, go ahead and skip this episode. This podcast is very much about healing, and in the Meadow, everything feels completely neutral. It just is. Death and violence are very much a part of this world and this life, and I really welcome talking about it and feeling about it all. And I'm so incredibly grateful that Andrea spoke so clearly and openly about her experience and that her soul shared so clearly all that we were releasing. So, if you're still with us, I hope you enjoy this really juicy healing. Here's Andrea.
I don't know where to start. I can start with the present. I'm currently an EMDR therapist. I do trauma work as a private practice. It's Wellness Within Therapy, where I utilize EMDR and shadow work and mindfulness with my clients who are primarily creatives, artists, high performance achievers, musicians. I've been doing that since 2014. And then I'm also a supervisor and therapist in LPS, which is someone who can write psychiatric holds for 5150 for people who are a danger to themselves or others or gravely disabled. I do that with a nonprofit organization called Sycamores. I've been there for 10 years. I live in Pasadena with my husband and stepson. We're all artists. My husband's a painter and my stepson is a designer. I went to grad school at Pepperdine for clinical psychology. Prior to that, I was an actress and a model. I also was a teacher. I taught at Long Beach Unified School District for about 8 years. And during that time, I was seeking an acting career. I had done some print work. I had done modeling, stage work. I was in theater my whole life. I grew up in the theater. My undergrad was at Cal State Long Beach, and that was for theater and film. So as I was pursuing being a screen actor for like independent film, that's what I predominantly wanted to do. And I was in conservatory. I was attempting to make money by working any job that I could. So I was a bartender, waitress, go-go dancer, improv. I was a teacher, dental assistant. Basically, I have had over 50 jobs in my life. It does seem like I've been through many lives. I told my husband when we first met and started dating, I'm like, you don't have to worry about me needing to like go out or party or like see new things or experience new things. I'm like, I'm pretty tired. Like I've done a lot. feel like I've lived multiple lifetimes, but I do get bored easily. So I end up like jumping from thing to thing. So while I was a teacher, I discovered that I'm an empath and an HSP, a highly sensitive person. I'm intuitive and I'm clairsentient. And so through that experience of working with students who were highly underserved and mostly from abusive households and lower socioeconomic, socio-emotional families where they weren't gaining support and they, were extremely void of getting their needs met, I discovered in myself these spiritual gifts and that the children really were drawn to me and they would share and they would open up. And I felt, called to help them and to guide them and mentor them. And through that experience, and then breaking up with my acting career because it was really challenging and felt like an abusive relationship because I was also in an abusive relationship with a partner that got physical and sexually abusive. And so I wanted to get out of all realms that were unhealthy and toxic. So I broke up with the acting career. I broke up with the boyfriend and then went back to grad school at Pepperdine for clinical psychology and started exploring Jungian, like depth psychology and shadow work, and got my own Jungian therapist and did shadow work. And, I've learned healing is on a continuum. There is no cure. Things exist and they ebb and they flow and they come and they go. And all we can do is really just manage them, but move through them and allow ourselves to feel and experience things and regulate them and move with them, move through them. And so having had a long history of trauma that started in childhood, my parents were extremely critical and they believed in more discipline, heavy-handed discipline. And we were raised initially Catholic, but then moved into like born again Christianity and Baptist church. And so there was a lot of trauma related to like religion and then physical abuse and then sexual abuse in my relationships. So I had a lot of healing to do. And so I started seeking out different healing modalities to help myself heal and then also to help lead others towards their own healing and a conduit for growth and a conduit for change and healing. So it's been a journey, as you know, as a healer. It's a calling, it's a labor of love. So I wanted to work on the 2 miscarriages, failed IVF, and these attempts at birthing a child, having my own child, because I always felt since my own earthly birth that I was meant to be a natural mother, like to birth a child, that is one of my main purposes on this earthly realm. It's to be a mother, to birth a child, to raise a child, to nurture a child without a shadow of a doubt.
To get into the healing, I started last night with the overnight container, and right away it got really cold, super duper cold. The temperature dropped and it started to fill with snow, and it became this Arctic landscape. And it definitely felt like North American Arctic. There was this stream that was running, and then it was like snow, and the land felt barren. There weren't really trees. It was really flat. It was kind of like a hillside. It seemed like it would probably be a meadow if it wasn't frozen over. And there was this little tent and a fire and some like fishing poles. It felt like camping. And then you entered and you were covered in these really warm furs and had snowshoes. So you seemed really prepared, like you were really comfortable in the space. You knew what was going on. But it also seemed like the way that you were going to spend the night was in this cold climate, almost like it reminded me of Wim Hof, or you know how people do cold plunges for their resilience. It felt almost like you wanted to challenge yourself or build your resilience overnight. And so you took off the furs and would do a cold plunge in the stream. And then you would get out and like pull out your knife and work on some animal skins or something. Like it felt you were really comfortable there. And so you kind of laid down by the fire and looked up, and it was this beautiful aurora borealis show. And it was really intense. And you just wanted to be left alone in this cold environment watching the magic of these lights, and you had everything that you needed. And so I left you there.
Yeah, I feel comforted by cold, and it also is that trauma response freeze. And it's a place where it brings soothing and comfort to the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it also keeps me stuck.
This morning, when I came back into the container, it was daytime now, but it was almost like you were tired of it. What seemed really comfortable the night before was now like, I'm over this. So I was like, okay, well, let's get to work. And you're like, before we can jump in, I need to do one more cold plunge. And again, this felt very Wim Hof. And so I don't know if you've ever done the Wim Hof exercises, but it comes up again later, and it may be worth doing, especially the breathing exercises or the cold exposure in the showers. So you jump into the water and then you come back and lay on the Reiki table in this snowscape crown. And I started to, pull out energies that were stuck in your crown space, and you were laying there and you were numb. All of a sudden, it was like you were there. You weren't a corpse. You weren't dead. You were there, but you were so numb that you didn't move at all. And it felt like this overwhelming, I don't know if it was like freeze response or dissociative like response, but it felt like you weren't in your body and you didn't want to feel what was happening in your body. And so we just kind of called awareness to that, but we continued the session. And what I was being shown is that the healing is on an aspect of your body almost that is connected to this topic. So you may not always be numb, but there was something about what we were working on. Ultimately, this was a healing for your womb space and your heart space. And so there was this like sense of numbness and like, just do whatever you're going to do to me and I'll check out. And so, yeah, I pulled out any stuck energies from your crown. And it's almost like because you were numb, there was not a lot. Sometimes we can get a lot of thoughts crowded in our headspace, but yours was pretty clear. Yeah, so clearing your crown was pretty quick and easy.
I usually wake up at like 7:30, but earlier than that, because you had said you were starting at 6, I was awoken and I felt a heaviness. I felt a weight on me, and I figured it was you tapping into my, psyche, my energy field. And I was like, okay, this is happening. And I didn't resist. I wasn't oppositional, but I definitely was sort of like, well, she's going to do what she's going to do. Like I didn't succumb, but I didn't resist either. I was just sort of allowing whatever to be. So my initial thoughts and reaction was, oh, that's exactly where I was when you started. I was allowing myself to be open and free and to flow, but not recognizing that I have such a disconnect with my brain and my body. Like I know I have in the past, but I didn't realize it was still like, it ebbs and flows. It comes and goes. But I guess I did put the trauma of the miscarriages sort of on a freeze or on a pause because, and you even mentioned that in your healing, because it's this unknown territory. Like, can I have a baby? Will I have a baby? Will I have another miscarriage? What will happen? And I think my nervous system and my throat, like I have been having like issues here in my throat. You can even hear it in my voice. And I feel kind of stunted, like when your growth is stunted,
right.
Like but my mind's not. It's like my body's reacting.
After I clear the crown, I always connect to God, and it looks like an electrical outlet. And you needed to take a moment because you were a little bit, not maybe a little bit more than a little bit angry with God. And there was this feeling that if I connected you with God, that you would have to let that go, and you weren't ready to let that go. So we gave you a moment to be angry. You like turned your back almost, and your knees were at your chest, and you like turned your back. I don't want to deal with you right now. And so we let you have that moment. And then after a minute, it was like, okay, I can do this now. And so we plugged you into God and let that energy run through you like an electrical current. So then I moved to your third eye. And then for your third eye, it was also kind of like there wasn't a lot of gunk. It was also related to this feeling like really checked out, fully checked out of your body. So once I cleared it up, I kind of like double tapped on it and it turned into an eye, but it didn't want to look. The eye closed because it also wanted to be checked out. So then to run healing energy over that, I brought in the rainbow that is time. And so I ran time energy through the third eye. And it was almost like the phrase that came is that it was like flossing. So we were like flossing your third eye with this rainbow of time. And at first there was a little bit of resistance, and I was shown how, okay, so since moving from California to Georgia, I feel time completely differently because there are seasons. And I didn't even notice how my body stopped time, because in California, it's kind of like time is perpetual. So I feel like I'm aging in a different way. I feel so much older here, all because like summer ended. And it was very clear that summer was over. And I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. And in California, I kind of like lost that feeling. Like I could consciously, logically celebrate the seasons. There are holidays. There are certain things that happen at certain times of year, but it's almost like my body didn't feel it. So I could be 25 forever. Something like it's very strange how different it is. Time was the thing that hit me like a brick wall. I think I was shown that because it was like running time through this third eye would also feel like a brick wall. The third eye is where we experience time. And I think that's why it's part of like why we're psychic, or, when you open your third eye, you can see other things, but it's all because of our ability to see time. But the more that we ran the time through, and it wasn't this painful running into a wall feeling, the more you kind of like relaxed into it. And the more you relaxed into it, the more time could come through. And all of a sudden it was coming like faster and faster. It could move forwards and backwards. I think that's where the flossing came in. And being able to move forwards and backwards in time also really opened up your third eye in a new way. And this crystal showed up there, and where before it was like a smooth quartz, all of a sudden it fractured or like fractalized. I don't even know if that's a word. It became more complex of a crystal. And instead of one rainbow coming through this clear thing, it was like how a prism makes the rainbow spread out. And instead of seeing one rainbow, you see lots of rainbows. Once it fractalized, all of a sudden there were all of these timelines that showed up that you could see. So you went from time wasn't really moving through there to being able to see clearly one timeline forwards and backwards, to now being able to see multiple timelines simultaneously. What it was doing was opening up all of the possibilities, because it almost felt like there was this feeling that you were headed towards something. And there was this like powerlessness feeling of barreling forward through time. And so in a way, this rainbow energy, this time energy wanted to show you that there are possibilities, and it opened up your ability to co-create. Not that you didn't have this ability, but sometimes there are parts of us that shut down to how much we dance with life. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience that there are certain things that I feel really powerless about, and I just gotta take it and move forward, just keep stepping forward one day at a time. And so this energy really wanted to open up all of the timelines so that you could see them, and open up hope is one thing, but also just potential. Okay, so then once that was coming through clearly, we brought up your brain, and I looked at your brain and it looked pretty good. Again, your headspace was really clear, but you were still just laying on the Reiki table numb. I was instructed to wash over your brain, and this was interesting. So normally in healings, I wash over everything with water and allow whatever kind of water to show up that wants to show up. And for you, I was instructed to wash over everything with milk, like flour infused milk. I don't know how much you play with herbs, but specifically it was a butterfly blue pea milk. Like, I guess you would call it a latte. It had this bluish tint, and it was mostly milk and a little bit of butterfly blue pea. And so we washed over your brain. We washed through your crown space. It was very calming. Butterfly blue pea is one of my favorite plants to work with. Its scientific name is clitoria something, because the shape of the flower itself is blue and it's shaped like a yoni. They didn't mess around when naming it. And so it definitely heals the womb space, which is great. It's also really great for the throat and opening up the throat. And it can be really calming. But I also found when I meditated with it, I got this sense of wanting to dance. It just felt so joyful that I needed to move and be in my body. And so it was almost like this plant really wants to work with you to bring you in, like fully in your body, especially in these moments that feel numb. Have you worked with that plant before?
I've only had it in a latte. I've never seen it or used it as an herb. No.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the latte counts. That's still taking plant medicine. And then we moved down into your throat, and your throat was frozen. Like, it felt like it had been iced over. And specifically, it was your larynx, your voice box had been completely frozen over, and it felt connected to this numbness. So we used Reiki energy to warm it up, and more of this butterfly blue pea milk wanted to come through and wash down your throat to cleanse it. Yeah, we like melted away this frost. And it felt like the frozenness was blasted through all at once, almost like there was an event that came in and froze everything in place, like the opposite of Pompeii, because Pompeii was like a heat blast that froze everything in place. This was like a blizzard blast that froze it in place. And the thing about the larynx is that the muscles of the larynx mirror the muscles of our pelvic floor. It's actually one of the reasons why we yell, or I don't know, I wouldn't call it a scream, but we like vocalize during childbirth. Because when you open your throat by making these sounds, it also opens your pelvic floor. So there was a mirror there. While we were defrosting your larynx, it also helped defrost your pelvic floor at the same time. In the energy work that I do, the throat looks like a tunnel. Our voice moves up from our solar plexus through our heart, up out of our throat. So we want it to be strong and reinforced so that it's a really clear voice. So we made sure that once it was warmed up and we had washed over it with milk, we pulled out any stuck energies. Once it seemed like it was clear, I noticed that there was this like little dude. I don't even know. It wasn't a real person. It was like a robot with a lever, and the lever turned on a snow machine or an ice machine to keep the temperature down. So anytime it seemed like it was being cleared up or warmed up, it was in place to bring the temperature back down, to ice it over. And it felt like it was a safety mechanism that you had put there after the original like icing. And so we pulled out that and we let the angels take it away and destroy it in the best way for it to be destroyed. We did like one final look at your throat, and there was something going on with your mouth, and you were like crying a little bit, like almost like it hurt your mouth. We gave you like a tincture and a mouthwash so that you could swallow down. And again, it was more that milk. It was a very healing milk, apparently. It kind of like filled your mouth space and went down into your throat and healed from opening all the way down into your throat. And then it was that once all of that was healed, it brought us down into your heart space. And this is where the real work began. So now you're feeling things, right? And then we get to your heart space, and your heart space is on fire. It's like a 4-alarm fire. We've got a fire truck and the alarm's going and people are trying to like blast it with water. And so I stepped back and was like, okay, what do we need to do here? And I'll say that in the way that I see the energy centers is the throat chakra is the element of air, and the heart center is the element of water. And then the solar plexus is a combination of everything. And then the sacral is fire and the root is earth. And so I knew that we needed water in this heart space. And again, there was someone there trying to blast water, but it was coming from this hose. And what we really wanted was the water to be there naturally internally. And the fire was trying to do something. It was almost like this rage and destructive force, and it was stuck. Someone had put a block between your heart space and your throat space, which is part of what like froze that over too. And then there was a block between the heart space and the solar plexus. So this fire was trapped in the heart space.
Yeah. It's like a disowned part. It's like a part of me that I was trying to disown and not look at in my body, but it's stuck in my body. As we know, trauma gets stuck in our body, and we have muscle memory and mirror neurons, and my body remembers, but my mind is like, no, I'm good. Like, yeah, I'm great. But to answer,
I know what to do. Yeah. I'm an expert.
Yeah. So it's definitely that part of me I've been trying to sort of, I don't know what's going to happen with that, so I'm going to push it over there. I'm good. I mourned, I grieved. And again, mourning is a process. It's never ending, right? Just like healing.
So yeah, it was like, don't worry, we've got it contained. But that didn't feel right either. It felt like this protection mechanism that was in place. Even these fire trucks that seemed like it was helping to put out the fire, that was a protection mechanism that was in place, but it wasn't what needed to happen to heal the fire. So I checked in, I called on help, and Kali, the goddess of destruction. To me, she always has like a really fire energy anyway. So I asked her what was happening, and she said we needed to let the fire burn, let it burn it all down to nothing, like a wildfire. But also we were going to move this fire and drop it slowly from your heart space through your solar plexus and into your womb space where it belonged. Fire energy is important in our bodies, and the fire energy in our womb space is what allows for creation and creative drive and desire and all that. And so we just needed to move it to its proper place and not eliminate it. But because it was in this heart space, and the heart space is so delicate, the heart space shows up to me like a garden, but not a garden because that sounds too tended. It shows up like a rainforest full of flowers. It's really lush, and the perfect ratio of water is like mist and sometimes rain, but there's like a wetness to it, like a jungle. Or, like in the botanical gardens. I don't know if you've been in like the tropical room and it has these misters going and it keeps it at a certain level of water. That is how a balanced heart chakra shows up for me. And so the heart space has a lot of fuel and it's also where our lungs are. So there's air. So it's like all of the elements we need to feed a fire are in our heart space, but we just wanted to move it down. Once we came up with a strategy, there was a little bit of resistance because it felt like you're going to rip me apart. You're going to destroy me, not just my heart space, but you're talking about burning down myself. Because that's the solar plexus, right? Self-expression, identity, all that, our core. And then you're going to put it in the womb space. And the womb space, it was almost like it a little bit let me tap in, but it felt so raw and dangerous that I couldn't just like think about it and go inside. And you knew that there was something in the womb space that was like dangerous almost, or that we couldn't see just yet. And so the idea of bringing fire into it felt so dangerous to you. You know, Kali was there and she talks about, you know, after a fire, if you think about the wildfires in California, my favorite in Malibu is like after a fire to go hiking that next spring because it's like really dark earth, but it's so fertile that all the life that grows from it is like the greenest green I've ever seen. And then contrasted to the dark earth, it looks even more luscious and green and alive. And so Kali came in with this reminder that yes, fire is destruction, but it's also rebirth, not just rebirth. It's rebirth from this fertile ground that's been fertilized by the ashes of this destruction and pain.
Yeah, I have a lot of rage. And I'm full-blooded Italian. I'm first generation Italian. We were allowed to be angry in the house. But it wasn't like a healthy kind of release of anger. It got to the point of, you know, abusive when the anger would come out of my parents. And then when it would come out of me, it would sometimes be, you know, self-destructive, or I would be punished for it. So I have a complicated relationship with anger. I feel like I have work to do around that. And then sadness definitely for me is a primary emotion that's covered up by my anger. So, and then exhaustion, like those three kind of, you know, they're intertwined. So I have to like get through the layers to get to like what's the core, what's really going on.
Yeah. It felt like that it did get to come down, but what it really wanted to do was to burn through all of these thoughts and all of the would have, could have, should have, you know, like all of these scenarios, just let them be destroyed by this rage.
Yeah.
And then it creates fertile ground for, okay, so that's gone. Like it's gone. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I want that. Yeah, I know. I want that. I want that.
It was like, okay, let's do this. And it wasn't like you have a choice, but it wouldn't show up if we weren't going to do it, right? So we started to take the fire and collect it all in one space and slowly drop it down. We pulled it out from your arms into your heart space, and we left behind this like charred earth in your heart space. And it was like, don't worry, we'll come back. But we had to leave it charred for a minute. And then we brought it down into your belly space, to your solar plexus. And on the way, we did kind of burn up all of these identities. And it felt like it was lost forever. But the reminder was that no, it's the ashes of these things that creates the fertile ground for what wants to be born next. So we let all of those identities burn in your solar plexus. And the solar plexus shows up to me as an island. So there's all of the elements together in this one space. And the island usually has a volcano in it from the fire that comes from the sacral. It rains from the water in the heart space. You know, it has weather like an island. We learn a lot about how we're feeling about ourselves from the state of this island. And so we just let the whole island burn.
That part, I felt myself start to get a little anxious and some pressure in my chest. Like the fire in my chest was like, kind of wanting to hold on to it. And I'm like, why? Why do I need to hold on to this?
And then it was time to drop this fire into the sacral. But instead of just like bringing it down, it was like there was a door, like a storm door, but it was heavy metal bolted, like there was something dangerous behind it. And so we let the fire kind of stay a little bit away, which it's a good thing we did, because when we opened the door, we were told that there was a dangerous gas inside the womb space. And so we were called to bring in this like metal box. It looked like a cube, and put it on the hatch of this doorway. So when it opened, all of the gas could escape into this cube. Once that was done, we like closed the hatch again on the womb. We closed the box, and I asked, how do we discard this? How do we heal it? And we were told to send it to the sun. The feeling that I got is that it was some kind of hydrogen gas anyway. And so that's why the sun was the best place, because the sun is made of hydrogen. And so we threw the box into the sun, and the moment it hit, it like exploded and sent this solar flare that made the aurora borealis show up again really like vividly, which reminded us that we were in this Arctic environment. Okay, so then once that gas was released, it was time to clean up the womb space. And this womb space had been locked down. It was a cave that was underground, and there was no light really. And it had this hatch covering the doorway, and the fire wasn't in there because the fire again was had moved up to the heart space. But there was this sense of volatility, and the gas itself was an explosive gas, which is why if we would have brought the flame in there, it felt like the whole thing would have blown us all to pieces. And so, yeah, there was this underlying feeling that you could explode at any moment, but not you emotionally explode, but like the world would be ending explode kind of thing. Like you would get blown up. This hydrogen gas was the first clue, because I was like, what emits gas? And then there was this like sulfur residue all over the womb space. And that's when I realized like, oh shit, there's a volcano here. And again, volcanoes, I love volcanoes. There's a volcano in your solar plexus. It's like such a beautiful, powerful earth, like a part of earth, like a limb of earth that's such a part of us. It creates land. You know what I mean? Volcanoes are really powerful. But that's when I realized like, oh, it's not yours. It's not your volcano. Someone else's volcano has been placed there. I could like zoom out and see it now. Once I realized it was a volcano, and it was leaving, it wasn't exploding, but it was almost like it was threatening to explode with this. It would release gas into the space, and it would like almost like choke you out in a way. Like I think of coughing, and it was like, oh, is it gonna erupt? Is it gonna erupt now? Every time this gas would leak, just to almost like it like was trying to keep its power over you by releasing this. So when I zoomed out, I saw that the volcano had been implanted between your sacral and your root. So right between like your womb space and your root space. It never released lava. It only released gas, which made it feel really volatile. And if you brought any of your own fire into this space, then it would cause the explosion too. So we needed to get rid of this volcano because it is not yours. It's someone else's energy. Goodbye.
Yes. What that part of the healing brought to mind for me related to abuse was before my first miscarriage. I was scared that the intergenerational trauma of my childhood would be passed down to my child if I didn't work on how I was going to raise my child. And I knew that I don't want any form of hitting, abuse, spanking, yelling, things like, don't cry, don't do that. Like, because we're meant to cry, we're meant to experience being a child and having fun. And so I was scared and concerned that I would be a bad parent. So I took that with me in my first pregnancy, and I was worried I wasn't going to be a good mom. So after that miscarriage, I was like, oh, maybe God. And you mentioned in your healing about God, because I'm angry at God. And I thought God was punishing me for like being in abusive relationships, doing things wrong, making poor choices. And that, I was raised in a home where if you sin, you get in trouble and you got to go. If you don't like ask for forgiveness, you might end up getting your name written in the book of hell, going to hell or what have you. So yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of trauma to this religious trauma, the threat of hell, the threat of punishment, like even people who move away from the church, it's something that we still have to dismantle because it shows up in like karma. It shows up in law of attraction. It shows up in all of these other ways of like, what's the line between personal responsibility and this like self-flagellation for not being good enough.
Yes.
It's really powerful.
It is. And so I did that after the first miscarriage and felt at fault and like a failure. And I ended up going to this therapist. She was a psychologist of like this, I don't even remember what kind of, it was really intense. She did a lot of energy work and she built a force field and she put me in it. And I was taken back to the moment where one of my ex-boyfriends, had used his head to run into me like a football player into my womb.
Oh my God.
And it took the air out of me. It knocked me down. I passed out and I was transported back there in this therapy session. And I was like, whoa, that's something I forgot about.
Oh no. I'm
and maybe,
so sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe he's the reason, or that experience or what have you is why I was at my womb, my body didn't feel safe to carry a child because it's unsafe. It was tormented. It was tortured. And I had the very life and breath taken out of me and, fainted, was slammed against the wall. So that, that came out in that session after the first miscarriage. And I was like, okay, I'm going to work through this. So I did, and I worked through it. And I was like, I'm going to be an amazing mom. My husband has a son, my stepson. He's never hit him. He's never spanked him. He only uses positive reinforcement. We had a really deep conversation. Yeah, it's amazing. He's a fantastic father. And we had a very serious conversation about this is how we will parent, and we will not, and we don't hit my stepson, my husband's son. We don't criticize, there's no like yelling or cruel words spoken. So I worked through this. It's like this felt like this transformational experience for me, like that I am a changed woman. I'm not going to hit my child. I've processed this, the womb beating and released this, and it's not stuck in my body anymore. I can carry life. And then with the second miscarriage, it happened again. And yeah, this volcano and this moving it out, it's like it has felt like there's stuff still stuck there, So it was really powerful when you said that and like how to move it out.
I again asked for help, like how do we get rid of this? And I was told that you would need to birth it. And so the Reiki table kind of turned into like a hospital bed, and you sat up and we called in the people that you love and your closest friends to be there with you. And we called in your angels and your spirit guides, and Archangel Raphael kind of like came to be this delivery doctor, and he was there to help birth this volcano. And it came out like, it looked like a volcano, but then it looked like almost like a stillborn baby. I'm so sorry. This is like tragic. And so I hope this is okay. But then it would be a volcano again. And so we knew that it was this energy that had been trapped, but it was still really potent. But you got to like expel it, and it was still really sad. It was like you knew that this was a destructive energy. You knew that this was a painful energy and you also really loved it. We let you have a moment. I was like, can she hold the volcano? And they were like, yes. So they let you hold the volcano. And then Archangel Raphael also delivered the placenta. It wasn't really a placenta. It was whatever magma pocket was left behind that we needed to clear that too, so it wouldn't get infected or, regrow or something like that. So we let Archangel Raphael finish that. And then we gave you the volcano, and it was time for you to have a ritual, like a burial for this volcano energy. When you started holding this volcano baby, the rest of the people disappeared and this spotlight came on you in this black space. You had a moment of being alone, and it felt like something that you had to do. You knew that you had the support of everyone, and it was nice to have the support, but you needed to do this alone. And so you went into a more wooded area in this Arctic snow, and you did a burial. So you dug a grave, and then you put the volcano in there, and then you covered it. But there was something very witchy about you. And so you did a very particular ritual that I don't know, but it was this burial ritual. You laid out the flowers, it was almost like you were laying them out in this 7 sacred directions. And all the flowers were really dark purple, really dark blue, almost looking like they were black, but they were really saturated dark colors. And so you laid out all the flowers into this, what would you call it? A mandala, some kind of shape. It felt very old, ancient European though. And you said some words to finish the ritual. You stuck a stake into the ground that was a torch, and you lit the torch and allowed the fire to burn. And you kind of stood there. You were wearing all black and you mourned. But as the fire burned, it started to melt away a lot of the snow around you and bring us back into spring. And so once that ritual was done, it was okay, I'm ready. We continued the healing where we went into your womb space and we called on some angels to clear out this cave. Now that the volcano was gone and it wasn't releasing any more gas, we could clean up the space. So they scrubbed the walls, and it felt like it was salt water, but magnesium salt, Epsom salt. And so they scrubbed the walls and then rinsed it with water and then brought in that milk, that butterfly blue pea milk, and cleaned it. The residue of everything was gone. Let's upgrade this. Let's remodel it, because there's no light being let in. And so it felt really trapped instead of flowing with the rest of your energy centers. So it was maybe we can cut in a skylight or something. And then I was shown that we need to actually get rid of the whole womb space and throw it into the earth. So we let that womb space crumble, and then we opened up the earth and put the old womb into the earth, it almost felt like another ritual where you were letting things go. And then we washed over the empty womb space with a lot of light and a lot of love and a lot of healing water and more of this healing milk, and then allowed the ashes of the old womb space to build the new womb space. We let it show up. And it showed up like those caverns in Arizona or Utah where you can walk through the red rock and it's really narrow and beautiful, but you can still see the sky, but it almost feels like a cave. And so it was more open. And then once that space was ready, we could bring down the fire into its rightful place in the center of this cavern. And so, now it was more open, lots of light. It could feed this fire energy up into your solar plexus so we can move creativity up, all the way up through your body. It started to feel really great. And then we moved into your root space. And interestingly enough, your root was pretty good. And I think it's because it was such a fortified womb space. The walls were really thick rock that the root almost was like a little bit weak, but it wasn't overcompensating or like sometimes we need to really open up or soften the root when there's this like protective energy, but your womb space was doing a lot of that work. And now that the volcano was gone, it wasn't putting as much pressure on the root. So we just did a little bit of clearing it out, running some Reiki energy, spinning it open and making sure it was like clear and aligned, and then running that root energy down your legs and into your earth star chakra. We made sure that that was really clear and plugged into the earth and rooted you all the way down, like dropped a grounding cord all the way down into the center of the earth. So you felt really good and rooted. And so now moving back up from your root to your sacral, things were looking great, into your solar plexus. The island needed to rebuild after the fire. And so what we wanted to do was move into the heart space. And we cleared out all of the like charred debris that needed to be moved out of your heart space and allowed things to blossom, like let the new, it's like we ran rainbow time energy over your heart to let it heal and start to bloom, give it time to bloom. And so all of this luscious green started to grow. It was really tropical. This butterfly blue pea showed up again in your heart space, started to bloom everywhere. I think it's like a vine. So it filled up your heart space. It grows in like Thailand, like tropical Southeast Asia. And then your heart was able to blossom into this beautiful rose. And so it became, instead of being this like stressful emergency fire situation, it became delicate again. And so once that was looking good, we dropped back down into your solar plexus and let the rain, water energy, like condensation from your heart space, which again, before was fire. So there wasn't a lot of water except for that, whatever that external hose was, and let the water rain down. It was like a mixture of your tears, like your emotional sadness could like rain down finally. Also the mist. And so it created this rainbow on the island, which felt really hopeful. So then we put magnets in front of you and behind you to release whatever you were ready to release. And the magnets started to pull. It felt like these heirlooms that you were holding on to. And you were like, oh, no. And so the heirloom, what we were shown is that it's okay to release these heirlooms energetically, because what you're releasing is the story that you have attached to them. And the story is creating a lot of pain. And so you don't have to carry the weight of the stories that these heirlooms hold, but you can still have, like, you don't have to get rid of the items themselves, just the story that's attached to it. So that's what we were throwing into the fire. And so you're like, oh, okay, let's pull all those out. So we pulled all this jewelry, and then you had a ring show up on your hand. And so you threw that ring into the fire and released it. And it started to feel again, like much lighter. Yeah, we called your authentic energies across all time and space. There was all of this space in your body now of what we had released. And so we wanted to fill you up with your essence, with your authentic self, and a lot of your essence. Because again, we also had like burned through a lot of identities in your solar plexus. So we really wanted to fill up with the essence of who you are. And as that was coming in, we asked that essence to reveal a word to you, like your word for, it felt like for the year, but like a guiding word that could be an identity or a path forward. And so they like showed that up to you. And that was for you to know. We had aligned all your energy centers, cleared everything. It seemed like we were ready to finish up. And so what that looked like is we dropped a grounding cord to the center of the earth, and the center of the earth called you in and wanted to do a healing with you. So you dropped into the fetal position and dropped down into the earth through the magma, and you're like in a bubble that looks like an amniotic sac, and you're called into the crystalline core of the earth. And there the earth spins, and it has this vibration that sounds like a heartbeat. So you're in this crystalline core with the heartbeat of the earth, like her fetus. And so she just holds you in unconditional love, and you can float without having to like exert any more effort or energy. And then when it was time, her love builds so much that she can't help but express you. And so you burst through the core back up to the earth, and she births you onto the surface of the earth. And she wanted to offer you this rebirth. And from this rebirthed space, you were ready to build this life that you wanted. It came from this like pure, unconditional love from Mother Earth that couldn't help but take you in and rebirth you out of this expression of her love. Well, we were still in the same place, but it had all melted away into this like beautiful mossy forest. There was like a little cottage, very witchy. Again, you had so many witchy vibes. It was very fun. So it was like this witchy cottage, and you started tending to the garden, and you were growing all these medicinal herbs and things for your potions. You had like a little cauldron in your fireplace. And then we called in your family to be in this house with you, and you could make it warm and magical, and it felt really good. So once it felt really good, we're like, okay, so let's wrap up this healing. I was called to wrap you in a Reiki bubble to hold space for this integration for you over the next week. And then I was called to put a Reiki bubble around this cottage that you had built with your family that was really warm. Like you guys were like having dinner together and laughing and sitting by the fire and making potions and, you know, doing your thing. So yeah.
My initial thoughts while listening to it was that you're extremely clairvoyant and intuitive, and the images you saw, the Reiki, you know, that you performed was all extremely synchronistic with what I feel in my body and where I am in my mind. The initial response I had with the feeling numb, I felt myself start to get a little anxious. Like the fire in my chest was like kind of wanting to hold on.
It almost felt like you knew how powerful or destructive this rage was. And so if I move it down through my belly, it's going to destroy me. But if I move it into my womb space, it's going to destroy like life, any life that I'm trying to make there. But that flame is also kind of like what fuels creation in a way. So it's safe to have, like, even the anger that you have or whatever feeling it would be about being abused that drives this feeling of like, I will never hit my kids, I will never do that, is like it's one of the ways that fire shows up in you, and it creates a version of you that cuts off the chain of trauma. So in a way it can be really beautiful and productive. And it's almost like that's where it wanted to be. Instead of being stuck in the feeling of the rage, it wanted to be creative.
Yes, I feel that.
You have to let it move down into that space.
Starting to feel it. Pardon me. I'm starting to feel it move down.
Oh, good. Yeah. And in a way we do kind of have to like let it destroy us, let it break our heart. That doesn't mean that we have to be like torn into pieces about it, but even just like accepting that that's a potential of it that will be destroyed.
Yes, because it's a refinement. You know, that's how diamonds are made, right? So this is what I need. I need to be refined. I need it to be destroyed to have fertile ground, new creation. So I'm glad I did this with you, because I didn't know I needed that until I heard your healing. So thank you. I mean, I felt it all, but I didn't know that's what I needed. You know, I had no idea.
There was something really cool about the time piece too. Speaking of like moving forward and into all the potentials of what are, what is your relationship with time, especially as someone who's intuitive and clairsentient?
It's similar to the way you described on the earthly plane, right? On here, it's like California, mono season, every day is the same. I hate that. I love diversity of climate, diversity of weather, diversity of atmosphere, environment. I love change. I love growth. I love traveling. I love time traveling. I astral projected before twice, so I feel stuck in California right now and in this confined containment of the mono season, and when people say, oh, it's so cold and it's raining, I'm like, can we just enjoy the 5 minutes that we get this little bit of cold that's not even cold? It's not freezing. Freezing is 32 or below. Like this is barely cold, guys. So I feel stuck in that time and space here when really my soul and my spirit that's trapped by this body is past, present, future, and I'm timeless. I'm endless. I'm timeless. I feel when I'm at my most alive, most conscious state, there is no time. And, and I'm transcendent. Like I feel it all and I can be, timeless. That's my core. That's my root. But I feel trapped by my body and I feel trapped by California, and my husband and I want to move. And these 3 years, the miscarriages have been like 5 years, and the IVF, it's all been a total of 5 years. But yeah, I felt the past 5 years have sort of been a freeze. Like I blinked and 5 years went by and I'm like, what the actual fuck? I do. The freeze that you explained is so accurate to me. And I obviously can only speak for me, but even working with my clients, like this is not, something other people are experiencing. So I'm like, okay, this is very unique. The other day I was thinking about how long we've lived in this house, and I was like, oh, it's been 2 years. And my husband's like, no, it's been 5 years. I'm like, we moved in here 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Like we had to look at the calendar, I'm like, oh no.
3 of those years have barely counted because really the pandemic did it messed up time.
It did. Yeah. So when you spoke on that, I was like, yep, that's exactly how I feel. And we want to move out of California for many, 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 many reasons. But the mono season is one of the many. And we do have a long-term plan of leaving the country.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Moving to the South has been really interesting because, I feel so much older. I feel like there's a lot more possibility in a different way, but because there's so many possibilities, I almost feel like I have been stuck in like, oh, this is a new way that I have to experience. Like I actually have to learn how to experience time here. And so there's almost like a learning curve in an interesting way. But there, the way that the time showed up and that it could split. Yeah. It felt like it really wanted to open up possibility.
When I saw your podcast, I'm like, this is genius. This is brilliant. You have this amazing gift that you're sharing with the world, and your whole intention and purpose behind it is that other people may, gain and gather healing from it themselves. And it's just, it's really beautiful because this is eliciting in me inspiration to work on this issue and use your healing to get embodied and to allow myself to be to get rid of the stuff there that I don't, they say let go, but it's like, what are we holding on to? And I'm holding on to stuff that I don't need to hold on to anymore.
And there you have it, a really powerful conversation with Andrea Forcina, MFT, of wellness within therapy. It's so funny because during the healing, I kept mentioning how easy it was to clear Andrea's headspace. And then after we had our conversation, I realized like, duh, she's a therapist. She's doing the work. And this is what that looks like. Her head is clear because she's processed this. The fact that we could go so specific and so dark was because her processing created space to hold some really challenging feelings and really challenging images. And then her root space was really strong, even with the volcano situation, because she's intentionally built safety for herself by doing the work, and through that is really grounded. It was also a really helpful reminder that even when we logically understand, consciously know how to process and heal trauma, our bodies and energy may be holding on in a different way because it's not meant to be thought through. It's meant to be felt. It's meant to break our hearts. It's meant to consume us and burn us to the ground so that we can rebuild ourselves over and over again from the ashes. I think when I started my energy work journey, I was a little bit hoping that I could get through the rest of my life unscathed, but no one does, right? My mind really thought if I just called in the right relationship or career or fill in the blank, then I could live my best life or whatever. My mind thought that healing was getting to the place where I logically understood what was happening, when I had solved the pain puzzle. But no, I couldn't actually embody the healing until I let it break me. And that's hard. It's so much easier said than done. That fear of being broken, being destroyed, kept me from the visceral experience of healing. Not only that, but it kept me in hiding. It kept me finding new ways to heal, more ways to isolate and insulate from further pain. But we are social creatures in an interdependent reality, and we got to break. I think that's what I'm starting to find, is that healing is less like solving a puzzle and more like building a muscle. The tension of life changes me. I can let life tear me apart in these little repetitions, or sometimes, when I need to max out in these really big moments. And every time I'm not dead yet, I can come back together a little bit stronger with a little bit more momentum than the last time. After the healing, Andrea reached out because there was some heaviness kicked up from the space that we had created. It felt like emptiness. So we spent a little time energetically reframing that emptiness as space for possibility. It was space to play and create and dance in the fields of hope. It was really beautiful to witness. And I'm really going to take that with me. So I hope that you and I may experience any emptiness as space for possibility. I hope you find some magic from this episode and that it opens the door to possibility and hope as you journey forward on your path. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on A Kind of Meadow with Rhiannon Vaughn.